It's about the time. Let's start today's webinar. So first, welcome everyone to join the first EOSC EDEN webinar. We will be focusing on what every trustworthy repository digital archive should be doing, focusing on 30 core preservation process description. I'm Fen Zhang from KU Leuven Libis team. I'll be chairing today's webinar. This webinar will be recorded. Before we begin, let's have a quick look of the agenda today. We will have a short description of the EOSC EDEN project and work package 1, followed by the most interesting part, co-preservation process, and 10 minutes live Q&A session. A quick note on how to interact. You can leave your question in the Q&A panel, and our speakers will pick up your questions in the last 10 minutes of the Q&A session, or they will be answering your questions by typing in the chat, in the Q&A panel. Let's start with EOSC EDEN project. This is Horizon Europe funded project, which focusing on enhancing and support digital preservation strategies at the European and national level. This project starts from the January 2025 and we end by the end of 2027. Our coordinator is CSC. I think most audience have already known that there are a lot of challenges on digital preservation. This including the cost and physical limitation of storage and service, which also lead to the difficult question, what digital objects should be preserved? And also there are a lot of uneven awareness and implementation of preservation practice and standards across communities and archives and repository. That's why it's very important for us to ensure the digital objects remains understandable and useful to the communities and the users. Facing this challenge, we have EOSC EDEN project focusing on 5 objectives. The first one is to establish a general framework and practice to support the creation and curation of the digital preservation across Europe. And also we will develop a series of tools and services to support the digital practice. And these services and framework generated from EOSC EDEN will be also testing within different disciplines. We also try to build a data curation and digital preservation network to boost the data creation and qualities in Europe. Together with our sister project Fidelis, we also want to identify and consolidate a network for repository and archives for digital preservation. To achieve these goals, we have 5 work packages under EOSC EDEN. The work package 1 is focusing on data and process framework for digital preservation. Our first speaker, Miki Linda, will give you more details. Work package 2, we focus on long-term access and preservation service and tools. These services and tools will be based on the framework generated from work package 1 and also be machine readable. Work package 3, we focus on discipline-specific requirements. More piloting study will be conducted to test the frameworks and service and tools. Work package 4 is focusing on expert and community engagement, including a series of activities to reach out experts and communities in digital preservation and curation. This webinar is also part of the action of work package 4. Work package 5 is important to coordinate the project internally and externally to make sure the sustainability and strategy alignment with EOSC ecosystem. EOSC EDEN project has brought 16 partners across Europe and also gathering experts in digital preservation, data quality and curation, also fair data management. We will try to ensure that this digital preservation practice and actions will be enhanced across Europe. Please also follow our EOSC EDEN website and our LinkedIn and Blue Sky social media for the upcoming events and the key outcomes of EOSC EDEN. You can also have a look of EOSC EDEN Zenodo community for the report and the deliverables of EOSC EDEN. I then give the floor to our first speaker, Miki Linda, who is the lead of digital preservation team at TIP Germany. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Finn. See if I can share my screen. There we go. Thank you very much. Yes, and I've the pleasure to introduce you very briefly to what we do in Work Package 1, the work package I lead within the scope of EOSC EDEN. So as Fen mentioned, EOSC EDEN is about digital preservation of scientific data, research data. To do that, we need to bring two communities to the table. We need to include the research data management community and the digital preservation community. The mapping of similarities and differences between those two communities is not really new. This is from a screenshot from a presentation based on a paper that we gave in 2020, where we looked at 6 different models, extracted key concepts, and mapped them to each other. But the reason I include this slide is because there's one universal truth embedded in this, and that is that research data management sits much closer to data creation. They're the ones who directly talk to data producers, to the communities who produce the data today, and advise them on best practice to use. And then there's the digital preservation community. And if we envision long-term on a time scale, they sit much later in the game and are more oriented towards future reuse. So that is something that we already recognized within EOSC EDEN and embedded it in the project structure. This image you just saw a minute ago. And there's the digital preservation specific lens that is brought into the project in form of Work Package 1. Within Work Package 1, we look at long-term digital preservation specific requirements, which are based on standards, guidelines, and good practice. There's a lot of knowledge that exists that has been accumulated over the course of the past 20 or so years in the field that we can build on. And digital preservation focuses on the impact of discipline-specific or digital object-specific requirements, in particular on the digital preservation process. So what are the risks included in objects that might pose a danger to make that information available for the long term? On the other side, there's the discipline-specific lens, which is brought to the project in form of Work Package 3. They look, as the name suggests, more on domain-specific or discipline-specific requirements, and their focus is more on identification, selection, appraisal, and current access. To give an example for that, imagine a scan of a tree in a forest, particularly the root, that is done by a specific researcher. The scan is a point cloud scan. It's produced in the file format E57. It's an open file format, so all is good there. And one of the requirements is that the geolocation needs to be embedded in the file format or in the digital object to ensure that you can match where that tree stood. So that will be the discipline-specific requirement, and that would translate into a set of requirements for the digital preservation side of things, which would mean that the preservation system needs to be able to handle that file format correctly. It needs to have a preservation plan and a process for preservation watch in place to align the designated community needs with the object itself. And the geolocation, which is embedded in the digital object, needs to be a significant property, so it needs to survive different migration steps over the course of time. So much for the background. What we do in Work Package 2 is, in Work Package 1 is very much aligned around the reuse fitness model, or short RUFIT, which we also developed in the early stages in the proposal phase of the project. So the reuse fitness model acknowledges the fact that a digital object has different data quality layers. There's the contextual data quality, so it's the quality what is actually described in a digital object. Is it of good scientific practice? Is it true? Is it reproducible, for example? Then there's the technical data quality, which looks more at the encoding level of things. Is it does it follow a validation mechanism? Does it follow a specific standard specification and so forth? And then there's the metadata quality, which looks at the quality of information that is supplied together with a digital object. And so those different quality pillars need to meet different vectors, so to speak, or different goals. The most obvious one is that of the preservation objective and the designated community needs. Whatever I decide for my data quality needs to be in line with the envisioned reuse scenario, the preservation objective for my respective future users, the designated community. But in addition to that, any quality decision that I make also needs to align with what my digital archive can do. The reuse fitness model, it codifies good practice from digital preservation research data management across different sectors. So many of you probably look at this and say there's nothing revolutionary new about the framework. That is true, but it pulls together a lot of strengths that exist into one concise piece of information. That is then to be used to provide a framework to support curation and preservation practice. It supports process to identify objects for digital long-term preservation, but also quality from the get-go. Not only metadata is a love node to the future, I think solid quality is much more of a love node to the future. And through that, it narrows the gap across different scientific disciplines that exist in digital preservation practice. So how do we organize our work within Work Package 1 along the reuse fitness model? Work Package 1 is divided into 3 tasks. T11 looks at the question of how and based on what digital objects are selected or appraised for long-term preservation. That task is led by CoData. Task 1.2, led by Bertrand from TIB, looks at what makes an object preservable and reusable for the long term, and in particular, what processes does a trustworthy digital archive need to include, which is the next presentation. And then we have T13, which is also led by TIB in form of Maria, which looks at how all of that can be applied in reappraisal. So what have we accomplished so far? For T11, we have conducted a survey on selection, identification, and appraisal processes. The first evaluation of that has been completed, and the next steps are the publication of the survey results at the end of the year in Deliverable 1.1. And based on that, or following that, we are looking to conduct expert interviews with those respondents who said that they'd be willing to volunteer for that in the next year and to formulate sample policies. To give a brief insight into the survey, we ran the survey between May and June of this year. We've had 250 respondents from 31 countries. I'm sure there's many here who responded to that, so thank you very much for that. The survey was organized around 3 different question areas, which are listed here, but I want to tease out the deliverable, give you one result, and that result may surprise digital archivists and digital repository managers in the room equally, because we asked people for how long they initially preserve digital objects that have been selected for the long term in years. And if we cast aside the no answer section for right now, the most frequent answer or most highly selected answer was 100 years with over 80 respondents. But the second most frequent answer was 10 years with over 50 respondents. So long term is somewhere between 10 and 100 years. And I think that says a lot about how we currently look at practice and what kind of quality decisions are made when taking digital objects on board. For task 1.2, what we have accomplished so far are the core preservation process descriptions, which you will hear a lot about in a minute. And the next steps for task 1.2 are to look at metrics that actually look at the quality pillars and define quality for the contextual layer, the technical layer, and the metadata layer. And task 1.3, the last task in Work Package 1, will not kick off until middle of next year. So I'm sure that you will be hearing much of us in the future. So to conclude this segment, I want to briefly highlight what the reuse fitness framework is not. I think it's important to also include what something not is. So neither the reuse fitness model nor the core preservation processes are a maturity model or a certification tool. They're not intended to do that. There's many great tools in the world who do that. But the core preservation process is linked to certification frameworks. You'll hear about that in a minute. And on a similar note, neither the reuse fitness framework nor the core preservation processes cover everything a repository needs to do. They focus very much on the digital preservation side of things, which is what EOSC EDEN is about. EOSC Fidelis is looking at the larger repository picture of things, and the core preservation processes are included in the EOSC Fidelis TTRAM model, which is the Transparent Trustworthy Repository Attributes Matrix. So I'd like to invite you, if you're interested in that, to look at the Fidelis work. And with that, I would like to hand over to my dear colleague Bertrand Caron, who leads task 1.2 in Work Package 1.
Thank you, Mickey, for your kind words. I will share my screen in a second. And you should see my slides. So I will now guide you through the core preservation processes as the first outcome of our task 1.2. I will start with the story. I will then guide you through the structure of these CPPs, and I will end with describing the perspectives that we have for further evolutions of these resources. So we'll start again with this diagram and remind you that we are trying to answer to this question: what processes does a trustworthy digital archive need to include? Work package 1 is indeed focusing on data and processes, and we are here focusing on the horizontal goal, the lower one, the Trustworthy Digital Archive capabilities. The work started with the observation that a lot of digital preservation frameworks, in particular, but not limited to the certification frameworks, are constantly referring to some specific typical processes that they do not define in detail. So what we wanted to do inside EDEN was to formalize these processes to get a common understanding of what they are about in order to improve the understanding among us. So maybe it's important to say also that this outcome was initially essentially a milestone, so an internal result that was meant to be handled to other work packages, for in particular work package 2 for implementation and tools. But we considered that it had some value and that it could be shared with the whole digital preservation and research data management community. And we consider that this could also be used for other objectives like training or advocacy. So we will certainly be interested in what you could do with them. So the core task group that we that provided these CPP is a reduced group formed by organizations within the work package 1 that had a lot of experience regarding digital preservation practices, mainly CSC, TIB, KU Leuven, and Archivum. You have the names of all persons, members of the project who were involved in this work, with, of course, a lot of input and comments from all other project partners. So we initially had to define this notion of core preservation processes that was not extremely detailed in the project proposal, and we had to do that to limit the scope in order to have something doable in the amount of time that we had between April and August of this year, sorry. So the way we framed core preservation processes is the following, in the following way. CPPs are specific actions that every trustworthy digital archive should undertake, either directly or through an associated service. So this is important because that means that not every organization tasked with the stewardship of digital objects is forced or is forced to consider performing these CPPs, but they have to check that their partners are performing them adequately. The two bullet points are limiting this scope. So first, it's important to know that the CPPs are focusing on operational activities. That means that a lot of fundamental activities related to strategic, managerial, staffing, and also management of IT infrastructure are not in the scope of our core preservation processes. The second element to keep in mind when looking at this work is that these core preservation processes are limited to generic processes that can apply regardless of content, domain, and discipline. We are very much aware that digital preservation is requiring a lot of activities that are domain-specific, but this will be the focus of our collaboration with Work Package 3 and of the development of our work in the next upcoming months. A few words, a few slides now on the general methodology that we adopted. Please note that if you want to have a more complete understanding of how we did that, you can read the milestone report that is focusing also on the methodology, and I'll give you the references in a few slides. We had to start from an initial list, and the most relevant list that we could find was within a resource published by a Digital Preservation Coalition that is called the Procurement Toolkit. And within this document, this set of resources, one is called the core requirements for a digital preservation system. You have an excerpt of that document in the lower right part of the slide. And you'll see that, you'll notice that it mentions a lot of actions that the digital preservation systems should support, and consequently, that the digital preservationists should perform. That's for the initial list, but we enriched it by considering a certain number of frameworks, guidelines, and reference documents that we consider relevant for our tasks. Some of them which are well known by the digital preservation community, the NDSA levels of preservation, the Digital Preservation Coalition RAM, a rapid assessment model. We also considered the main certification frameworks, Core Trust Seal, of course, Nestor Seal, and ISO 16363. And we also added a few reference documents that are specific to the research data management context. The EOSC Long-Term Digital Preservation Task Force recommendations and the FAIR implementation profiles. So starting from the initial list, we started an iterative process, and you see here the evolution of the initial list to the final one in version 1.0. You will be able to find this table in the report that I will mention in the next slides. Just here to highlight the fact that we really want the CPP to be a living resource, and that we want it in the future months, but possibly years also, to be enriched and improved in a regular way. So that's something that I think is important to highlight. So that's for the elaboration of this list that led to this final, at least for our first milestone. These are the 30 CPPs that we defined. We assigned them identifiers from CPP 1 to CPP 30. The important thing here to keep in mind also is that the numbering is not significant. You might notice that the first CPPs are more oriented towards bit level preservation activities, while the process described at the end of the list are generally more complex or high level, let's say, and related to topics like risk management or access, etc. So But nevertheless, the list is proposed in no particular order. The second thing that I would like to mention is the fact that we have wanted the list to be extendable, possibly by the project, but this is not in our immediate goals beyond what you as contributors could indicate us in terms of missing gaps. But you can, but the main thing is that you can locally extend this list for your own needs, and that is probably the most important thing to say. Yeah, so when writing these CPPs, we realized that we had to not only provide a glossary of digital preservation practical terms that we are using extensively within these documents, but we also had to provide some kind of data model that is simple, but is trying to reconcile three top-level notions that we had to discuss, but that are described in three different frameworks that are, despite sometimes their statements of compatibility, are not always aligned. And these are, of course, the OIS that provides the information package notion, the premise data dictionary that provides the digital object notion, and METS, metadata encoding transmission standard, that provides the metadata notion. And each of these have different subtypes that we adopted. So the importance of having notions that are defined in relationship one to another. So the outcome itself is the report published as a Zenodo publication. If you will see that it is composed of a series of PDF documents. The first one is the report itself. It describes the methodology and the approach that we adopted and how we reached the conclusions and how we produced these PDF documents describing processes. I already mentioned the glossary, and what we also put in this report is a template for developing new preservation processes. It's basically the blank template for each of these documents with just the structure and the guidelines for filling in them. So we created here some easy access ways. So the QR code and a short URL, tiny.cc/cpp-DESC if you want to quickly access to the report. I would like to mention that we do not commit to the persistence of this short URL that should be used for just conveniency of access. So if you want to reference the outcome, the report itself, you should still use the DOI from the Zenodo publication. So the generic structure of these CPPs is the following. So the main section is the initial one, the description section. It starts with inputs and outputs. So what comes in the process and what comes out. It's very useful to frame the scope of each CPP. Then there's the definition and scope, the trigger events that cause the process to be performed, and a step-by-step process description. The second part of this of these documents are relationship sections that define the CPP in context and in relationship with other processes. The third part is the link to frameworks. So we ended up considering essentially the following frameworks: the certification frameworks, the CTS, Nestor Seal, and ISO 16363, and Premise and OAIS as additional documents. And the final section is about reference implementations and is has a part about use cases and links to publicly available documentation. I will now guide you through the main sections that I've just introduced for you to see the structure of these documents from different CPPs. So for example, this is the initial inputs and outputs section of, it's just a snippet from the CPP 27 that describes the file repair process. The way we handle any kind of broken data. So inputs are described in terms of data, metadata, and documentation or guidance or policy, and outputs are described similarly. The next section is about definition and scope. Here we have the definition of part of the definition of the CPP 18 Community Watch, and we initially wanted it to be pretty concise, so a few paragraphs. Nevertheless, for the most complex processes, and Community Watch is one of these, we couldn't have something that would be less than 1 page. So it's between a few paragraphs and 1 page, a little bit more. And it tries to give some kind of common current definition within our community of the process. It also highlights the challenges, and it describes the different purposes. So for example, if we take another process, which is a checksum generation and recording, we describe the action itself, but we also say that it could be used either for integrity checking, but also for deduplication. Next is the trigger events section that is the list of events, either regular events or other core preservation processes that could lead to this current process to be needed and to be performed. And then the step-by-step description starts, is the main part probably of this document. It's in the form of a table that presents the steps in the SIPOC logic, so supplier input, process, output, and customer. What I would like to say is that within these columns of supplier and customer, you should find essentially other core preservation processes that produce the input or use the output of each step. So we tried to be at the same time practical, so provide real guidance to people who are beginning this domain, but at the same time keep it quite generic. So there will be no mention of specific tools here. Nevertheless, in the case where it was relevant, we provided a few links, in particular to the Copter tool registry that is maintained by OPF and DPC, and that could lead the readers to examples of tools that can help with the performance of such step. Next is the relationship section. The first table here is focusing essentially on dependencies. So what other processes are necessary in order for the current CPP to be successful? Nevertheless, we also added a few, let's say, logical, procedural, semantic relationships that seemed interesting to also provide to the reader. So for example, here for CPP 15, emulation and rendering tools, the table indicates that the process is facilitated by normalization and creation of derivatives. And of course, the relationship description is trying to describe a bit more precisely what the relationship is about. Next section is alignment with digital preservation frameworks. Now it's, oh, sorry, there's an error here. CPP 11 is about replication, and here you will see how certification frameworks are referring to this process. So sometimes it's an alignment with direct reference of the process. Sometimes it's a more close match. So we wanted to not only talk about alignments, but sometimes misalignments and as a matter of fact, absence of alignments in certain cases. Finally, the reference implementations is probably the section that will most benefit from your input and also from the work that we will do in the next months. We recorded here a few use cases that help illustrate the quite generic and sometimes a little bit abstract description of the step-by-step process. It should be noted, nevertheless, that sometimes some discrepancies can be noticed between the way we describe the step-by-step description of the process as an ideal way of performing it and the use cases. And same thing applies to the publicly available documentation, where currently, essentially, the organization that were part of the core task group indicated the sections of their documentation available to anyone that are dealing with that are describing the set process. Yeah. So if you want to approach the core preservation processes in a different way, we created some proof of concept, a visualization tool. You can access it again through this second short URL, tiny.cc/cpp-viz. And what it provides is the list of these 30 processes in the form of some bubbles grouped in categories and related to each other through the relationships that were described in the description documents. These categories are can be of multiple types. We have implemented currently 2 of them, one which is logical and that the group used initially, but we are very much aware that multiple categories exist for grouping these CPPs. And the second that we provided is kind of logically the mapping to OAIS functional entities. So if you want, you can visualize all CPPs that are most relevant in the context of the ingest functional entity, for example, or processes that are most relevant within the data management entity. what the visualization tool also allows you to do is to filter out processes and relationships to be able to easily visualize some types of relationships to other processes. So, for example, here, this screenshot shows the CPPs that are requiring file format identification to be successful. So, in a nutshell, if you have currently these two ways of interacting with CPPs, you can directly go to a specific description if you want to understand the process itself and its purposes, if you want to see how it's referred to in different certification frameworks, and if you want to have examples of reference implementations. On the other hand, you can use a visualization tool if you're more interested in the way it is it appears in a specific context with relationship to other CPPs, dependencies, triggers not to be confused with, etc. If you want to extend your workflow with more core preservation processes, yeah, I would like to just mention the fact that you can easily jump to the description of each process from the visualization tool if you want to. So currently, these are the two entry points that exist. So let's now finish with the perspectives. What's next? What we are currently envisioning. So, as I said, CPPs are very much a living resource, or at least we wanted them to be so. So what we plan to do is to continue developing them. The main, probably the main objective is to translate the step-by-step description into BPMN diagrams through a complete process analysis. So that might have some impact on the CPPs in the next the next months. What we want to do, and in this case, we will rely a lot on the input of the community. So please, if you're inclined to provide us use cases and reference implementation, possibly just in the form of a link to web pages or blog posts or conference papers, anything. But we will integrate them into the next version of the CPPs. In addition to that, we want to enhance their maintainability and usability. And this will be done through, first of all, the migration to a GitHub repository, and at the same time, a structured data representation that will allow for specific, an evolution process that should be more easy to handle. And we also want to introduce semantic versioning. As a matter of fact, we don't want to release them as just major versions, but we would like to have a more regular update process that could allow for minor typos to be corrected and possibly backwards compatible changes, for example, addition of use cases to be done seamlessly. And finally, the one important part is how you contribute. You could contribute to that with providing feedback. So, as I said, we're currently moving these CPPs to a GitHub repository, the EDEN project GitHub repository. And this GitHub repository will be the main entry point if you want to provide feedback. So we created this third short URL, tiny.cc/cpp-feedback, and that will lead you directly to the EOSC EDEN Work Package 1 CPP descriptions repository. You can use two different features of the GitHub repository here. If you want to correct minor typos, or if you have directly a simple use case to provide, you can submit an issue with this issue tab. But if you want to bring to the community a more general questions, suggest a more important change, we also provided enabled this discussion tab and create categories that you can use to provide any feedback or discuss and start the discussion on any topic related to CPPs. If you're not that comfortable with this way, we have alternative ways. So in addition to that, in the README file of the GitHub repository, we have links to Google Documents that are here basically to gather your feedback on specific CPPs or specific parts of the CPPs. These documents have the comments and change suggestion features enabled, so you can directly suggest changes this way. Also, we have a form in the Eden Fidelis website if you're more comfortable with this way of providing feedback. So please contribute to that. Give us any opinion on that. Provide us with the way you have implemented or publicized your implementation of these core preservation processes, and we will very much appreciate that. So with that, I will thank you again. These are the ways to reaching out to us if you need to. And I have also added two references to blog posts from our dear contributors to the CPPs if you want to have personal insights on these processes. Now, thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them in the next minutes.
Thank you, Bertrand. So before we start the Q&A session, let me thank our speakers, Miki and Bertrand, and also thanks to all the audience for your attention and participation. Please follow the EDEN and Fidelis website to stay updated to our key project outcome and upcoming events. We will now start the Q&A session, and our speakers will answer the question you have submitted.